another 30 seconds, still a few more folks in the waiting room. But it's great to see you all this evening. You'll see up here just a couple basic rules. Please stay muted and keep your camera off when you're not speaking so we can focus on what's being said. At any point in time, looks like we already have some great chat action happening, but please feel free to submit your questions via chat. We want this to be interactive, so at any point in time, go ahead and type your thoughts there, and we'll be sure to get to as many as possible. And of course, please be respectful. I'm so excited to see so many folks joining us this evening. And without further ado, I would love to pass it off to our host, Senator Kim Jackson.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm so grateful that you all are here. Thank you for taking this time out of your schedule to join us to catch up. Please know that you can, as you're already doing, put questions in the chat. We welcome that. And you know, I'm gonna make an executive decision because it's my show. You're welcome to turn your cameras on if you want to. It's actually helpful for me to see some visual responses along the way. With me today, I have Representative Lopez and Representative Clark. And so I want to invite Representative Lopez, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for doing this, Senator Kim and Jackson, and I'm glad to be here. I think this is very important to have this dialogue with our constituents. We've been in session for a few weeks now, so I'm glad that we have the opportunity to have a conversation and respond to your questions. My name is Zulma Lopez. I represent District 86, mostly in Central DeKalb. Almost no cities, but I do have a little bit of Tucker, Clarkston, and Pine Lake, but mostly central unincorporated DeKalb County. Happy to be here.
And Dr. Clark, you're still on mute.
Thank you. I have done that all day today. Thank you so much for hosting this meeting and allowing for us to reach out to our constituents and hear their concerns and answer their questions. My name is State Representative Jasmine Clark, and I am the representative for House District 108, which encompasses the city of Lilburn and surrounding areas of Norcross, Tucker, Stone Mountain, and Lawrenceville, all in Gwinnett County. And I really appreciate, again, this forum. I do apologize for my background. I am doing double duty, and my daughter is at track practice. So while she is running around the track, I am here to answer your questions. And so I really do look forward to tonight's forum.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. And we are all pulling double, triple duty these days, especially. And so Representative Clark, really appreciate you for taking the time out to juggle yet another ball with us. I'm going to take a moment. I am Senator Kim Jackson. I am many of you all's senator, and some of you are, you get to be honorary members of District 41, but District 41 serves Stone Mountain, Clarkston, Tucker, Pine Lake, all the places that Jasmine already named, or that Representative Clark already named. So many places in both DeKalb and Gwinnett. So very grateful to be able to represent you all. And I'm going to introduce you. My Chief of Staff, Elizabeth Wilkes, is here, and she's going to be helping to pose the questions. And Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark and Representative Lopez and I will do our best to answer the questions that have already been pre-submitted. And you certainly are welcome to continue to place things in the chat as well. Elizabeth?
Yes, thank y'all so much. And as a part of our collecting questions, we also asked constituents for what topics are on their minds, knowing there's a lot of different issue areas that pending legislation is covering right now under the Gold Dome. And so the top two out of the poll, the top two issues right now on folks' minds are number one, COVID, number two, criminal justice reform, and number three, voting bills. Of course, that's certainly the hot topic this week. But just to kick it right off with COVID-19, as the pandemic still rages, we're approaching a year when things really begin to shut down. And if I could start with Representative Clark, given your expertise, would you mind giving us an update on where we are with COVID-19? How is the state of Georgia responding to COVID-19? What's the latest that constituents should know?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So when it comes to COVID-19, we are a year into this pandemic. And, unfortunately, a year later, we are still dealing with the effects of the virus. We are still seeing large numbers of new cases. We now have more variants to the virus than we had a year ago. And we are still seeing hospitalization and death. A few things that have changed over the year, however, is that the age group that is getting infected is not necessarily what we consider that high risk group that we talked about this time last year. Instead, it's more so a younger cohort of people that are catching the virus. But despite them being younger and despite, messaging around, younger people can fight it off better, or that younger people are less likely to get sick, unfortunately, we are still seeing hospitalization and unfortunately death in our, younger people due to SARS-CoV-2. That said, we do now have multiple vaccines available. We are still in phase 1 of vaccine distribution, but the governor has just announced recently that they are expanding that phase to include even more people. So we're moving into where we're going to finally be able to vaccinate teachers and essential workers. However, up until very, very, very recently, we were only vaccinating those who were 65 and older, as well as those who were emergency workers, so your EMS, your firefighters, and your police officers, as well as those who worked in the healthcare field and those who were residents of long-term care facilities. And so we are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's really going to take resources, getting enough vaccine into the state to get it into arms of people that want it, so that we can start to see the other side of this pandemic. And so, it is my hope that as we ramp up operations, that is what happens. And but even still, with all of these efforts, with all this mitigation, I think that we are still going to be wearing our masks and keeping our distance for quite a bit of the remainder of this year into next year as we try to get a handle on this pandemic. And I just want to end with, historically, this is almost the same exact timeline as what we saw with the 1918 influenza virus. So, it took a couple of years for that virus to slowly move its way out of society. And, SARS-CoV-2 is seeming to imitate its predecessor 100 and something years later.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Jasmine. I'm not sure if you're able to see the chat, but there are several questions that have come in related to COVID-19, and wondering if you might be able to speak to them. One question being, when will the vaccine be available to the general population? I guess that means people who are our age, and people who are under 65 and not in some of the special categories. And also, what is the governor doing or what is the state plan doing in terms of making sure there's equity and distribution in both rural and urban areas? You gotta unmute yourself again, please.
I got to get used to that. So when it comes to the general population, I'm thinking, just looking at the way things are going and announcements from the Biden administration about getting vaccines to states, that late spring, early summer we will finally be able to get to everyone. Right now, we are trying to do this in priority groups in order to get the people who are most likely to be affected, injected is the best way to think about it. But, you know, over time, as we get these people who are most vulnerable vaccinated, we are going to continue to expand and move into new phases. And so, you know, it's really up to the governor, however, and our Department of Public Health on how we roll out our vaccine distribution. And so, you know, as we get more more vaccine in, not virus. We don't want more virus. As we get more vaccine in and we're able to ramp up vaccination through mass vaccination sites and making sure that people know where to get vaccines and are making those appointments and showing up to those appointments, we are going to definitely see this happen a little faster than it has been. I like to think of it as like a train. When it first starts moving, it's moving very, very slowly, but then over time, as it picks up that speed, that momentum, it starts going. And I think we're just now starting to pick up the speed on this vaccine train. When it comes to equity and distribution, largely every county health department has the ability to request the vaccine for their community. What we're seeing actually is in some places they have more vaccine than people that want vaccine, and in other places there are more people that want vaccine than available vaccine. And so trying to figure out the best way to equalize that and to make sure that the people who want to get vaccinated have access to the vaccine is really important. Again, I think through the federal distribution as well as our state and local efforts, we are going to get people vaccinated. That is really important to a lot of people, and that is something that we are working on. I am on the Congressional District 7 Coronavirus Task Force with Carolyn Bordeaux, so I'm weekly talking to the federal government about how we can do what they can do. And at the same time, I also am in contact with our local public health department in Gwinnett about what we are doing when it comes to vaccine efforts to make sure that we're getting things out.
Thank you for that incredibly comprehensive answer. I'm also so reassured that you are in close contact with all these different agencies and at the federal level now that we can continue to expect more. And thank you to Representative Lopez for naming that introduction. I actually just got a question. Would each of you name what committees you are on so folks can know what areas and topics you're focused on in your committees? And if you want to go ahead and kick us off, Dr. Clark.
I remember to unmute this time. Yes, so I am on the Higher Education Committee, the Budget and Fiscal Affairs Oversight Committee, the Interstate Cooperation Committee, and the Banks and Banking Committee in the Georgia State House.
Great, and Senator Jackson?
Sir, yeah, I am on the Senate side, so I'm on agriculture, natural resources, and public safety and government oversight. Those are my 4 committees. And then I believe, Zulma, you can say yours out loud, even though you put them in the chat, because everybody can't see the chat.
Sure. I on the House side, I am on Judiciary Non-Civil, which deals with anything that relates to criminal rules and procedures. And so that has been it's been a very involved committee. I can say that we meet at least 3 times a week, and each of our meetings are at least 3 hours because we really dig deep into the bills that are proposed, considering creating new misdemeanors or felonies. So it's a very important committee, and I am glad that I was assigned to that committee. I am an attorney, that's my background. I also sit on economic development and science and technology.
Yeah, 3-hour meetings, that's definitely no joke with everything else going on. And I know Senator Jackson, you're particularly happy with your assignment to public safety for many reasons, but primarily because many efforts around criminal justice reform on the Senate side go through that committee. And so since that was our second most popular topic among the constituents we polled, would you mind giving folks a sense of where we are with criminal justice reform right now in the state of Georgia?
Yeah, sure. And because Representative Lopez is on the non-civil judiciary committee on the House side, she'll also be able to speak to kind of what's happening, moving in the House. So I'm going to make space, sure, I leave space for you to talk about that. On the Senate side, there is a little bit of bipartisan support around certain issues as it relates to criminal justice reform. Most notably, there is bipartisan support, and this bill will be coming to the floor tomorrow to limit the length of time that people can be on probation, and I think more specifically to actually help expedite the process so that people who have not reoffended, who haven't had any problems in the last 3 years, this is felony probation, that they will be able to be removed from the rolls. The way that it currently works in Georgia is that we have some of the longest probation sentences, parole and probation sentences in the country. And our rolls of how many people are on the probation list, it outweighs the country 2-3-fold. So this is a bipartisan bill that's got some real movement to really address that problem. I hope something is being similar to that on the House side. If not, we'll get our bill over to you all on the House side. There is, I mean, certainly the Democrats have offered a number of other criminal justice reform bills, everything from police reform to making sure I have a bill that guarantees identification cards to people who are being released from prison, to ending stand your ground laws, to removing citizens arrest. I see citizen arrest came up in the chat. There is a bill in the House that has overwhelming bipartisan support to certainly reform citizens arrest laws. I believe that will be coming out of the House and getting to us in the Senate, where it will also receive a significant support, and the governor has certainly agreed to sign off on that. Zulma, do you want to speak a bit about what's happening on the House side?
You touched upon most of the things that we're seeing on our side. I was really proud to co-sign on the House side. We also have a bill to allow offenders to get out of probation early, and that's also a bipartisan bill. And so I don't know now, in terms of how the process works, we are now where we know that next week we're going to have crossover day. So whether that's going to come to the committee for a full hearing, I just don't know yet. I haven't heard that so far. I mean, I haven't heard that up to this point, but it is a bipartisan bill like the one in the Senate. And so I knew that there was that companion bill, and I'm hopeful that one of them will pass. So that's very good. The not so good that I can share from my committee is that there are so many bills that we see in duty non-civil that are really under the radar, that are not in the news because are not the big things that we all know. Citizens arrest, no warrants, no chokeholds. But I see a tendency from the bills that we see almost daily, from Tuesday to Thursday we meet, that are pushing for mandatory sentences, and that worries me, that are pushing to expand, in some instances, the probation or parole, or create new felonies for things that we can resolve in other ways. So you can really see, if you're at any time interested, you can watch the live stream of our committee meetings that are public, and you will see that the conversation from the Democrats and the Republicans, you can see the starting point, and that where we're coming from, and that difference in the way that we think, which is that we want to see more rehabilitation, that we want to support accountability courts, that we want to really give a chance of an individual to get out of prison and be able to be reintroduced into society in a very meaningful way. And so that's disheartening for me because I have to deal with it every day on that committee, but we are there to fight the good fight. And I'm happy that I'm in that committee and that there's some progress in other areas like you mentioned.
Senator Jackson, looks like you had a follow-up to Rep. Lopez.
Yeah, Senator Lopez, are those bills that you mentioned, the not good bills, are they making it out of committee?
Some of them, yes.
Okay.
So we'll see. We saw one last week that passed the House that has to do with, and these are technicalities, but they're important because they really affect lives. And so the one that passed last week that had a very thorough discussion in subcommittee and committee relates to allowing an offender or someone that's in prison when the time comes for them to have their parole review, whether their file was going to be made public to the district attorney, but not the defense attorney. So you see that discrepancy there, and that passed the House. And so a couple of more that we've seen this past week relates to creating felonies for example, now with COVID, we've been getting a lot of packages at home. So people are complaining about theft at home. We already have a statute that covers that. So we're creating a new felony that relates to that. That's really unnecessary. So things like that really, just, it's not going to make the AJC, but they are important because they're creating new crimes really that are passing.
Yeah, thank you for the update, Representative Lopez, and that's definitely concerning, and that's why we're here, so we can get the inside scoop. And yes, and to Senator Jackson's point, I wanted to say we get a lot of chat activity about voting, and if you want to keep going first here, Representative Lopez, on the House side, can you talk about the latest bills regarding voting?
Well, there are multiple bills, unfortunately, and we were bracing for that. Of course, the overwhelming voter turnout at the general and in the runoffs elections, we were expecting this pushback. Now, the quantity and the restrictions that these bills are intend to do and to affect is really it's overwhelming, and I can give you an idea. I mean, there are bills that restrict the ability to limit the early voting period, limited the time where we can request an absentee ballot, and when the actual counties can issue the absentee ballots. Now they're asking, the latest and most pressing one is House Bill 531 that was filed this past week, had a hearing at 8 a.m. in the morning, and I believe just now ended a new hearing on that bill. And that's getting a lot of pushback. When you see the committee hearing, really the starting point is this false idea that there was fraud in the election. And so our point of view is that has been it's been proven not to be true by courts, by multiple audits, and so that's a false premise. And so you're starting there and making assumptions, and when you see that the members on the other side really believe that happened, it's really disheartening that they continue to spread that misconception. And so that's where they're starting. Now, the bill can still change because there's a lot of pushback, and we have to be very public about this. And ACLU, you can look more information. ACLU Georgia is on top of all these bills, obviously fair fight, and there's a lot of press around this. It is unfortunate that it happened so quickly. And we are going to see this in the next few days on the House for a vote. I guarantee you that that's going to happen. So pay attention. I posted the link for the screen for the hearing, and we'll continue to do that in the next few days once we know when that's going to come for a vote. In the meantime, you can also write the members of that special election committee and continue to spread the word, that because, you know, I'm sure Senator Jackson and Dr. Clark are receiving hundreds of emails a day with our constituents saying, why are they doing this? Why are they limiting my ability to vote? You know, COVID has made it very difficult for us to go out and vote in person. And this was so convenient for me, the elderly, people that are, you know, maybe their immune system is compromised and they don't want to expose themselves. Dr. Clark mentioned that this virus is not going to go just because you get a vaccine. So we have to deal with this, and not only for this year's municipals, but we're looking forward to 2022. Another thing that I get asked sometimes is the what's happening in Congress and how that can affect Georgia with the John Lewis Voting Act, and that's something that we are paying close attention. Now, things in Georgia are moving very, very quickly, so I don't know how quickly that's going to move in Congress, but it's something that we also have to pay attention. If that passes, that definitely is going to put a check on all these voting restriction bills. I can answer any more questions. I don't know if I haven't been checking the chat.
Yeah, no worries. We've got folks on that. So for the moment, how about Senator Jackson? Can you give some insight on what's happening on the Senate side around elections and voting?
Sure. So we're seeing very similar things on the Senate side that you're seeing on the House. So the HB 531 that Representative Lopez mentioned is an omnibus bill. It's long, it's 46 plus pages, has lots and lots of small bills combined into one. And we just had our own omnibus bill dropped yesterday that we'll be reviewing, and that will be pushed through committee very quickly to make sure that it reaches the floor. You know, ultimately, these bills are all aimed at making it harder for us to access the vote, kind of under the cloud of, or under the subterfuge of, under the subterfuge of it's making our elections more secure. But in fact, it's really just, it's presenting a number of hurdles. You know, a number of you all as constituents have already reached out to me. I'm incredibly grateful for that. I've heard from a number of people who are under 75, but who are still elders in this community, who are very, very much opposed to the notion that you have to be 75 or older to get an absentee ballot. A number of you have been very clear that at 70, 71, 72, you want to vote from home. You want those comforts. That I actually suspect that the number, that age may actually get dropped down. That's probably one of the only things that I envision we might compromise on. At the end of the day, the bills are aggressively repressive. They are. And I hope that you all can take some comfort in knowing that those of us who are on this call and the Democratic caucuses in both House and Senate are fighting hard. We are being a voice of reason and really trying to hold our Republican colleagues to account in this work, and in continuing to call on Republicans of good conscience to step up and to fight these bills. We can't win without Republicans of good conscience stepping up. And so I know somebody asked, like, is it helpful for us to email or to contact legislators who are not our own? Yes, if they are serving on, for the Senate side, it's the Ethics Committee. That's where all of our, ironically, that's where all of our voting bills go. If they're on the Ethics Committee, then they represent all of Georgia. They don't just represent their district. And so please contact them and voice your concern as well. I think at this point we have to have an all out, every hand on deck, every tool that we have in our toolbox, from letters to the editors, to phone calls, to email presses, to even putting on masks and showing up and marching on the Capitol. At this point, it's all hands on deck if we want to defeat these bills. Every question that you all ask me in the box about, will this help? The answer is, we got to try. We have to try.
Absolutely. Representative Clark, do you have more thoughts on this issue as well on the House side?
Yes, I'll be brief because I think that my colleagues have really laid out the issues with the bill. And I went through the bill. I combed through HB 531 and I have also combed through SB 241, and they are bad bills. They are bad bills that have little pieces of good things so that people can say, oh, well, I support that one thing. And so therefore, oh, it might not be so bad. But these bills are going to harm a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. They attack every part of our voting, from absentee to early voting to Saturday and Sunday voting to runoffs. I mean, it literally has something or does something to every portion of our election, and the things that they are doing are not positive things. And so I echo what my colleagues have said. Every single person on either the special committee on election integrity, which is the committee that all voting bills are going to in the Georgia State House, and the ethics committee on the Senate side, those committee members need to hear from you. The rules committee members need to hear from you. And at this point, any representative, because it's about to come to the floor. So any representative that that represents a part of Georgia is voting on how we administer our elections in the future. And these changes are not, they don't fix any actual tangible problems that we have. And so it's really important that they hear from you, they hear your story, so that we can, stop, or at least try to stop, put forth as much effort as possible to stop this from happening. So they can't say, well, no one told me that they didn't like this. They'll listen to you all before they'll listen to us. And that's just the truth of the matter. And so they need to hear from the constituency.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely want to raise that up. And I also want to elevate a great exchange that's happened in the chat. Senator Jackson would like to share a little more on this. Also, given IDs is the concern of one of your bills too.
Yeah, so Mr. Hutchinson asked the question of if we're going to mandate that IDs be shown for absentee ballots, are we going to provide free IDs to Georgians? The answer to that is, I said to him in the chat is, well, yes, I love how you think. And yes, there are voter ID cards, but here's the caveat, because nothing is ever quite so simple. The Republicans have proposed that that you apply for an absentee ballot using the statewide portal. And if any of you all did that this previous election, you have to put in your driver's license number or your ID number from the state issued driver's ID card. However, the voter ID card that is free for anyone who is able to prove their identity, that number is not an acceptable number to put into the portal. So you would have to actually make a photocopy of your voter ID card. Voter ID cards are most often possessed by people who couldn't afford to buy a state ID. So I'm not sure how they're going to afford to be able to photocopy and then mail in a copy. So Mr. Hutchinson, you've hit on something that's really important. Even though there technically is a free voter ID card, it is not actually useful to you to be able to sign up for an absentee ballot as it's currently constructed. And yes, if anybody's interested in questions around IDs and who has access to them and who can't get access to them, I can give you like a 2-hour talk about that. It's something I'm very, very invested in, because I serve with people who are experiencing homelessness, many of whom do not have IDs. And it's proven to be a very complicated situation in Georgia.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a super important answer. And I want to make sure definitely covering questions that are coming in live as well. And back to the very beginning, our first question posted is as follows. Would you please discuss the state budget and the implications of the proposed tax cuts? Would someone like to speak to the budget? Maybe Representative Lopez to start us off? Or yes, great.
I was answering something on the chat, but yes, I can do that later. So The question was to talk about the cuts.
Yes, budget, exactly.
All right, so we already went through the small budget, as I learned. It's called the first round, where we supplement based on the revenues that the state received from last summer. Some of you may remember that there were substantial cuts during that process in anticipation of what the pandemic have done to our revenues. And I struggle with that first vote. That was my very first vote as a newly elected representative. And part of me struggled with the fact that, we know that the revenues were higher than anticipated. And even so, the budget that was presented from the governor and through the appropriations committee, I saw it as a skeleton budget. And so we were really voting, and of course that goes through the appropriation committees, which I'm not part of, and they do the job of allocating resources depending on the agency's needs. But to begin with, we are not starting at a fair point, because we knew that we have that surplus and we have that revenue that was just being returned to the I guess the savings account, instead of investing that in the communities that are struggling, that are suffering, that can actually really help the economy. Because when we help the ones that are in need, when we help individuals that are struggling to pay their rent, that goes back into the economy. So to me, that was a struggle, but that was a long answer. The short answer is that particular budget at least returned 60% of the cuts to education, and that to me, that was very important. Funding public education is my top priority, and so that was important in conjunction with the federal funds that we are getting. And so that kind of balance that discussion. But we are still to see, that discussion moving forward. I don't know if someone else on the other side would like to chime in. But constitutionally, we have to pass a balanced budget. My issue with the discussion is always, to begin with, the numbers that we're dealing with are not reflective of my values, which are that we have to support the ones that are most in need. We have to expand access to healthcare. That's a no-brainer. We continue to refuse to do that. And so those are the conversations that, even though we don't have the votes, we must continue to have the conversations and push those discussions.
I'm curious, Ms. Blackman, Janet Blackman, I believe you're the one who asked that question. Is there something more specific about the budget that you would like to hear about?
I was just curious. I'm a retired state employee, and I've been on my soapbox for years about all of the tax credits that the legislature's extended without any kind of process for evaluating whether or not the citizens of the state of Georgia are benefiting. And I know that we have underfunded public health for eons, and that's showing up now. Of course, education, just a number of programs. The series that the AJC did about inspections of nursing homes, and I guess Representative Lopez put it very well, that in my mind, you fund your values and what your priorities are. And it's just frustrating. It's frustrating to me to see some of the things that have been funded, and especially, like I say, I get on my soapbox about these tax credits that have been handed out without a process to adequately evaluate them, to see if we're getting the benefit from it. If we are, that's great, but nobody, it just seems like nobody looks at that. They want Georgia to be #1 for business, which is you know, which can be great, but if you don't have adequate education, adequate infrastructure, you know, adequate health care, how many are you really, you know, if those things are allowed to go down the tubes, then what do you have to attract somebody to your state, you know, to provide jobs? So anyway, that's my soapbox issue with the state budget. And I get very frustrated. So it's always kind of interesting to me. I don't follow it. I follow it through the newspaper to see what they're doing, what you guys are doing as far as the budget goes. But that's about it. But that's helpful, very helpful.
Well, and thank you. I will say that we did pass out of the Senate today a bipartisan bill that would require there to be a special committee that does exactly what you're asking for, that evaluates the benefits or the not benefits of all of these tax breaks. And in a rare performance from Republicans, it even includes that the minority leader has to approve of the independent economist who assists in this. Yes, I see all the surprised faces. We were surprised too. So we're actually excited and hopeful that we may actually get a fair and true read of what these tax benefits and tax cuts are doing for the state. So hopefully, yes, you're welcome. And hopefully Representative Lopez and Representative Clark, it's a bill coming to you. So hopefully you all can take care of that and get that out as well.
Yes, that sounds good. And Senator Jackson, I did want to point out, because I know the question did also include something about the tax cut that was recently reported on. That tax cut has not been voted on, but that is something that people in the House are working on. And you know, every year they do this, and to be honest, some of it is politics. They want to be on record as trying to cut taxes and things like that. But, to your point about making sure that we are running our government adequately, I think it's very important that any tax cut take into account that means that's spending money. And if we are spending money, then, do we have that money to spend, or are we just cutting taxes to have something to campaign on in 2022? Because those are two different things. And so, I will have to look at that very, very, very closely, because I still think we are underfunding a lot of things: mental health, education. Our Department of Labor right now is still not up to par where it needs to be to get unemployment out to people during this pandemic. Department of Public Health, we still have not expanded Medicaid in the state. There is a lot that we need to do, and this pandemic has shown us what happens when you run a government on bare bones, is that when there's any emergency whatsoever, we find ourselves in a really bad position, where then we're cutting $1 billion from education and millions, hundreds of millions from other things that we actually need in a pandemic. So I appreciate your viewpoint on this, and I am always very wary about the motivation of tax cuts. I pay taxes. Yes, I would love to pay less taxes. I don't think there's a single person that wouldn't, but when you understand what taxes are going toward, I think it's really important that we not be so quick to want to spend money that we may not necessarily have to spend in our state.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you all for your comprehensive responses on that. To go back to criminal justice, we had another question from Mr. Carter. Specifically, I'm going to direct this to Senator Jackson. He and his organization are looking for ideas on ways to address police demilitarization, as well as strong anti-lynching legislation. So could you speak a little bit to those issues?
Yeah, I mean, my most cynical response is that you have to convince Republicans that this stuff matters. But the perhaps more comprehensive response is that we have to be able to, I think, nuance and find the places where we meet and merge with Republicans. So the citizens arrest law has been a place where we've been able to meet with some common ground. I think that we will probably be able to find some common ground around the stand your ground law, as long as we make it clear that you can still protect your home, your domicile, and your car. But you know, Mr. Carter, unfortunately, I don't have a really great answer to this, because right now the state of Georgia is controlled by people who are more interested in building a wall around the Capitol with spikes on the top of it than they are with the process of demilitarizing our police forces. There's a bill over in the House, and maybe Representative Lopez, I'm not sure if it came through your committee, but it essentially makes it illegal for any city or county government to seek to reallocate the funds that they have for their police department in any given year more than 5%. So if the city of Atlanta, for instance, decided that they wanted to invest in communities in a different way, as opposed to funding millions of dollars for their police department, this bill would restrict them from being able to redirect their own funds. It's actually quite ironic, because generally Republicans believe in small government and local control, but these bills actually seek to limit the local control by saying that you can't do that. I don't know if that bill will pass, but that's the type of environment that we're working with right now in Georgia. Yes, Representative Lopez, please.
It came to the floor today. It was a very lengthy discussion, and members of both parties talked about the bill. And it is a reactionary bill. The bill itself has inconsistencies. It contradicts in some sections. I mean, it is bad policy, but it passed on the premise that the local government, they're out there to defund the police, and they're out of control. That was kind of the theme, and so. That is disingenuous when we know that local communities understand their communities better than us representatives and senators, because they're dealing at a very granular level with their communities. And so we're limiting their ability to allocate funds, and not only, yes, it's for a 5%, but it's at a 10-year term, which is absurd, because we know that things are going to change. Look back 10 years ago. It's just ridiculous how we're tying their arms to better serve their community. So it did pass today on the floor. I guess we can go back to that question on criminal justice reform, because I saw on the questions that were submitted, someone asked about what about district attorneys, oversight types of boards or commissions. And so I co-signed a bill on a bipartisan bill on the House. Excuse me, there were two bills, one from Democrats and one from Republicans. And that conversation, we agreed to hold that conversation. And of course, the idea behind that was to prevent DAs, like the case of Ahmaud Arbery last year, from not doing their job, right? And being able to get away with it. So I think that conversation is going to continue. We agreed with our DA, in particular, interceded and asked us for more time to work with the Georgia Bar in strengthening the rules that applies to DAs, and maybe that it's a partial solution. So we are going to allow them to work that process, and depending on what happens with that, we will revise that that bill. So there are conversations, in that specific instance, there were two bills, one from the Democrats and one for the Republicans, but addressing the same issue, that there needs to be some sort of checks on what DAs are doing across the state. So that's kind of a side note on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to make sure we get to this question. This is specifically for Representative Clark. Would you please share an update on the shared parenting bill you're sponsoring? It's a long question, but I want to make sure we cover all of it. This constituent's wondering where it is in the process, and also what motivated you to support the shared parenting effort. And will the bill have a retroactive provision that can help parents and families who do not currently have shared parenting? And how can we support you?
All right, thank you very much. The bill that they're referring to is HB 96. HB 96 is a bill that would create a 50-50 presumption for equal parenting or near equal parenting time. It except when there is a case that deals with family violence. It is a bill that that was brought to me by a constituent in my district brought this bill to me. It was something that was very important to her and to her family. And so after talking with her and looking at the issue and researching the issue, I did see it as something that I would like to see. The goal of the bill is to give children who find themselves in a situation where their parents are separating or their parents have not been married, getting the goal of the bill is to give that child as much time with both their parents as possible, which research has shown in some instances, many instances, is in the best interest of the child and has more favorable social and behavioral and health outcomes. And so that's where the bill came from. Now, as far as where the bill is in the process, it has been assigned to the Juvenile Justice Committee. That committee is chaired by Chairwoman Mandy Ballinger. And she has the sole discretion to give the bill a hearing. And as of now, it is a bipartisan bill. It has an equal number of Democratic and Republican sponsors on the bill. The only roadblock right now is to get it a hearing. Now we are a week away from crossover day. So if it is not heard by sometime middle of next week, then it will not cross over, and we will have to wait for the bill to possibly get a hearing either after crossover day or at the beginning of the next year, which is the second year of the term. So we have time. It's a 2-year session. We are in the first of those 2 years. But it is a bill that I've taken a lot of questions, a lot of calls, a lot of emails, a lot of meetings from people who are both for and against that bill. And I appreciate all of the feedback that I get about the bill. If you want to support, the best thing to do right now is to contact Mandy Ballinger, Chairwoman Mandy Ballinger of the Juvenile Justice Committee in the House, and ask for the bill to get a hearing. She is taking an active tally on the bill. And so people who call for or people who call against, that is being tallied by her office. So if you or someone wants, whatever your feelings on the bill, Chairwoman Mandy Ballinger is the person to reach out to at this point, as she gets to decide if it gets a hearing or not. So thank you for the question. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you so much. And just a testament to how much control, or not control, but yeah, really power and control that the chairs of committees have to really make the call of what even gets heard and can continue in the process. As they say, most bills die in committee. So yeah, that's a great, and thank you, Angela, for putting Mandy Ballinger's contact information in the chat. for those who are interested. We are almost out of time, y'all. I want to respect our time together, and I just want to actually uplift this question we received, which is what can we do to help you, as in what can constituents do to help y'all as legislators doing what you do in this work. And I think some suggestions have been offered, but I would invite each legislator to consider that question, as well as provide closing remarks to finish our time together. So Representative Lopez, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you so much for participating. By way of being here, that tells us that you are engaged, that you are active in your community, that you want to know what's going on, regardless of what happens with these voter suppression bills. We know that that most likely is going to end in court, and that we will have a final, I guess, map road for what's coming for the 2022 elections, and we will continue to inform you and how that process is moving forward. And then eventually, once if that passes, then we have to educate the community as to how prepare for making sure that people continue to vote and are not disenfranchised by all this process. So in terms of how to help, is just keep being active, keep asking questions. I'm sure that I am not alone, and I can speak for my colleagues on this, and that you can always email us and ask us questions. Of course, when we are in session, there's a lot going on and we cannot reply immediately, but I respond to all my constituents. And I also have a newsletter that I send out during session, that we're sending a weekly newsletter, and I'm posting information on my social media pages so that you can also, if you don't want to call or get an email, you can also look on social media and see what's going on, because part of our role is informing you, keeping you abreast of what's going on, because there are so many moving parts and things are moving pretty quickly. So thank you for being engaged. Please continue to do so. I do believe that that what you do matters, and it changes minds, and you can affect change by participating and making sure that your voice is heard.
Thank you. Representative Clark, final remarks?
Yes, thank you so much, Senator Jackson, for putting this town hall together. And thank you to all the participants who took time out of your evening to join us and discuss the things that are important to you, your concerns, to address us with questions about what's going on. This is important. And the information that you gleaned from today, I hope that you sow it into those who may not have been able to attend this evening, but who should also be aware of what's going on at our Gold Dome. I want to echo what my colleague in the House said. We need all hands. We need all hands on deck when it comes to fighting some of these bills that are coming. And we need you all. During the election, I know a lot of you all probably wrote postcards for people, or for candidates, or you wrote postcards. This is also a time where we need postcard writing, because one of the things that happens, an email you can kind of ignore, a phone call you can kind of pretend like you didn't see, but a postcard, even if you pick it up, even if you glance at it for a half a second, you see it long enough to know what that postcard says. So I do think that, let's try everything. Let them know how these things affect you, so that when they are making that yes or no vote on these bills, they understand that they are affecting real people with real, and there are real serious ramifications and consequences to the decisions that they make when they make them, especially if they're making a politically calculated decision and not thinking about the effects it has on everyday Georgians like you all. So thank you again. And, anytime, I love participating today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And also to your point of sharing for folks who weren't able to make it, unfortunately, the live didn't work out at the last minute, but I will be posting a recording of this on socials so you can share this video later on with folks. And finally, Senator Jackson, please close us out.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your schedule to join me. So many of you all pressed a little mark by my name, and I'm just so grateful that you have entrusted me to represent you. Please know you can always reach out to me. And then finally, I will say I am not without hope. I want to be clear that even if these bills do pass through our General Assembly, and should the governor sign these anti-voting bills into law, I am looking at a group of people here, and I know that there is a great cloud of us beyond this call who are prepared and stand ready to go door to door, to knock on every door that we need to call every person that we need to text as much as we need to, in order to make sure that folks get out and they're able to vote in 2022. Our ground game is strong. And I am also very clear, and I'm not without hope, because I also know that there are Republicans, faithful Republicans who believe in the value of this democracy, who will also go and help scan IDs if they need to, and who will help people fill out those forms so they can get their absentee ballots if we need to. So no, I'm not without hope, and I hope that you all live with some hope in knowing that we can still win. Even if they pass these bills, we can still win, and I believe, in fact, that we will. So again, thank you all so much for your time. To my staff, to Zulma Lopez's staff, to Representative Clark's staff, thank you all so much for all the work that you've done behind the scenes to make this happen. You help us look good, and so we are grateful. And finally, to you all, our residents, thank you again on behalf of each of us.